Or,
Yes.
there you go. This is our March AARP, New Hampshire and Coffee and Conversations, Safe Driving. My name is Kathy Hoey and I am an AARP New Hampshire volunteer. Our guest speaker this morning is Tim McCool from New Hampshire AARP Driver Safety. With me today is AARP New Hampshire volunteer Bill Sparks. Bill will be monitoring the chat and raising your questions and comments throughout this program. I would like to cover a few housekeeping items. Be sure to mute yourself to ensure your microphone, by ensuring your microphone icon has a line through it. This will help to eliminate any background noise. We would love to hear from you though this morning. So if you would like to ask a question or comment, please use the chat box, which can be accessed by clicking the chat button at the bottom of your screen. At AARP New Hampshire, we are focused on the health, financial security, and social connections critical to the well-being of the 50+ in the Granite State. We carry out our work through targeted advocacy at the state and federal levels, compelling engagements of the 50+ community statewide like this, and serving as a trusted resource for information for our members and the public. Today, we are happy to offer this educational event to help promote safe winter driving. Welcome, Tim, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Appreciate the invitation to be here.
Okay, you're it.
I'm it. Okay. I'm a AARP Drive Smart instructor. We have, I think 11 here in the state. Always looking for more. If anybody's interested, there are more, we'd be more than glad to go ahead and get you up to speed on it. But we teach classes. I'm actually down in the southwest corner of the state. I live in Jaffrey. The larger city close to me is Keene. So I do a couple classes in Keene every year at the senior center. The Smart Driver class can be varying lengths. Different states have different requirements for the length of the class. Here in New Hampshire, we are what we call a 6-hour state. So it's a 6-hour class. 6 hours is kind of long for most people to sit. So generally, when I go into a venue, I discuss with them, and most of the time we split it up into 2 days. So I'll do half the class on day 1 and half the class on day 2. The good thing is you don't have to sit there and listen to me talk the entire time. Their curriculum, which when we had the pandemic, which is still going, but when it really was kicked in pretty hard, they revamped the curriculum. So we've got a whole brand new curriculum that we rolled out here in 2022. And so they've got some really good videos as part of it, and everything. Probably the most important aspect of the class, though, is to get the class involved and answer questions that they have. As a matter of fact, that can actually lead to the class running a little long sometimes, trying to answer all the questions. But that's part of the class. To give you a little background on me, I actually have a background in law enforcement. I'm a transplant to New Hampshire. I've only been here not quite 5 years. I actually came from Kansas. And yes, when you get out to Western Kansas, it's pretty darn flat. So there's not much out that way. You can actually see trees 20 miles off at that point. So it's so flat. But I was a police officer for about 5 years. And then I was a state trooper for 25 years. And part of my duties as a state trooper is I did safety and education. I retired as a sergeant from the highway patrol. And again, I taught all kinds of defensive driving classes. We've got AARPs, which we're going to talk about today, which is, it's got a focus towards the older drivers. However, good defensive driving is for all drivers of all ages. So a majority of the class is pertinent to just about all age groups. I've even had some kids just into driver's education that have come through the class in order to expand on their driving skills. But I've also taught AAA's driver improvement program, and then there's the National Safety Council's defensive driving class. I've taught them all at one time or other. Gave up the AAA and the National Safety Council, and now I do the AARP's classes for them. So did that while I was a trooper. I retired from the Highway Patrol, spent 7.5 years with the Kansas Traffic Safety Office, which it's part of their DOT. And I did all kinds of safety aspects with them, but also did the defensive driving with them also. So it's a pretty worthwhile class to drivers of all ages. But again, AARP's does focus a little bit on the older drivers. Kathleen, your mic is not on.
I'm
There you
sorry. Thank you very much. Yeah,
No
that's
problem.
an impressive resume. And I think we have had quite a variety of New Hampshire weather lately. What do you teach? Yeah. So what do you teach people about driving in these such poor conditions?
Well, again, when we're talking about different conditions that we drive in, you know, here in New Hampshire, we have a pretty substantial winter and wintertime driving. Probably the smartest thing is just to learn to slow down, not to get into a hurry. When you start hurrying and you start out driving what your car can handle for defensive driving. So slow down and slow and go get you there rather than trying to rush somewhere. It's when you start trying to change what direction your vehicle is going too abruptly that our vehicles have a tendency to lose contact with the roadway surface, the friction between the tires and the pavement. And again, you know, here in New Hampshire, we deal with ice and snow. Our DOTs and our cities do a wonderful job of clearing as best they can. I've certainly been impressed since I moved up here. They do a heck of a job. And they do that as quickly as they can. But again, it does take a little bit of time. So if you find yourself having to drive on, you know, ice or packed snow, just try and keep it slow. And generally you can go ahead and get there. It's when you're doing some abrupt changes that things have a tendency to go bad, unfortunately, when we're driving. So not only do we have the ice and snow here lately, but you know, anytime you have some adverse weather, rain, again, it is possible, it's called hydroplaning, to lose contact with that roadway surface when we get some rain showers. You get a heavy enough rain and you get your speed up, and you can hydroplane really speed-wise in your car. You get up over 30 miles per hour, you can hydroplane depending upon the amount of water that is on the roadway. You know, they do design, our engineers do design the roadways. They're not perfectly flat. They do have a crown in the middle, and they design those roadways for the water to run off, but not always are the roadways in that perfect shape. And then draining off from the roadways can be somewhat of a challenge also. I'm just thinking of some roads that we have around Jaffrey where I live, and there's a few places where the soil has gone ahead and raised on up, and it doesn't drain so quickly. So knowing where you might potentially go ahead and run into some standing water on the roadway and things like that. We also have sometimes when the water comes down, or it doesn't drain quite well, and we have standing water on the roadway, much more likely to hydroplane at that point. So it's just being aware that the adverse conditions are out there and trying to, you know, go ahead and drive accordingly.
So thank you, Tim. So much of this is about driving defensively. Do you have any other tips about driving defensively, like about braking or even actually just staying home? Yeah.
And that's a very good tip also. You know, to my experience up here, there's, you know, if you don't have to get out in it, probably ought to stay home. And for the most part, New Hampshireites do a good job of following that. But if you do have to get in there, take it slow. You know, got to get into work and things like that. Just take it slow, and that's going to help you go ahead and get there. Being aware not only of weather conditions, but the other traffic on the roadway. Try not to follow too close. Give yourself, you know, a proper following distance. You know, when I got into teaching defensive driving, we used to talk a 2-second following distance. That's 2 seconds between the back of the vehicle in front of you and the front of your car. We're up to 4 now, so we've doubled that over the years. And there's a good reason for that. The more distance or more space you can have, the more time you have to be able to react and get your car safely stopped prior to hitting somebody. I have noticed one thing since I've been up here, and people do like to follow closely up here. So when I talk about a 4-second following distance, so as the rear of the vehicle in front of you passes a landmark like a signpost or a crack in the, you start counting 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, and that 4 should be out of your mouth before the front of your car hits that same location on the roadway. So increase your following distance. Now, if somebody is following you too closely, you've got no control over that. That's up to them. But keeping your vehicle speed down still gives you time to react. And then, you know, eventually, if you feel somebody is following you too closely, if there's a safe place to go ahead and pull off and let them pass and get on around you, go ahead and do that. I mean, you know, you'd rather be able to get to where your destination is safely with no vehicle damage rather than be involved in a car crash.
Thanks, Tim. Could you mention something about braking? Because I know that was an issue when I was taking some classes. Yeah.
Yeah, braking is dependent upon several things. A, how good your brakes are. Hopefully you've got a decent amount of pad. That's what condenses down and again helps slow your car. You don't want to be out driving what your car can safely do, which is where the following distance comes in. But braking is important. Again, the faster you go, the more time it's going to take you to go ahead and get stopped, and more distance also. So being aware of you know, your following distance, your speed, to go ahead and keep that down so you can go ahead and go. I see my co-pilot back behind me here is waking up. So he's yeah, decided to get up. Oh, he's going to go back to sleep. Okay. But again, braking is very important, especially due to what's, you know, the surface of the roadway. Again, if it's wet, if it's snow, if it's ice, all those things do go ahead and figure into, you know, knowing or the braking distance is going to take your car. Larger car, heavier vehicle, longer it's going to take you to go ahead and get stopped. And we could take that on to tires, because again, your tires in your vehicle are the only point of contact that your vehicle has with the roadway surface. So as you go into winter, that would be a good time to take a look at the tread on your tires. You need to have a sufficient tread depth in order to go ahead and safely operate, to be able to handle not only water, but snow that's on the roadway also. So, you know, we do have, there are still tires out there with snow studs on them. I have a tendency to run what's called all-terrain tires on my vehicle. And again, the all-terrain generally is an aggressive tread. And again, I'm going to make it through winter, and probably spring and into summer, at that point, I need to be buying some more tires. I got new tires, just after we moved up here. So almost 5 years ago, so, and I drive an SUV. I drive a Ford Edge. So it's a good vehicle. It's front wheel drive, not rear wheel drive. So that's helped me out here in the winter weather a little bit. But snow and ice is still snow and ice, and tires are going to spin on it if you try and over accelerate or hard brake. So you've got to go ahead and make sure that you go ahead and keep aware of what's going on.
Thanks, Tim. Let's check with Bill to see if our audience has any questions or comments. Bill?
Yeah, Tim, we have several questions. One is, how often should people be checking their brakes? And are there other mechanical things that they should be checking?
Very good. That's great. That's a great question. Every time I take my vehicle in for an oil change, I have them check my brake pads. And probably the other piece of equipment, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Phil, is windshield wipers. Most people, until they're streaking, they don't change them. Windshield wipers are no longer made of rubber. It's a synthetic material. The two things that affect those wipers, heat and cold. So hot summers or cold winters do affect those windshield wipers. I generally replace my wipers twice a year. So going into summer, I replace the blades, and then going into winter, I replace those windshield wiper blades. But tires, windshield wipers, all things that we need to check.
Great. Actually, that question was from Ashley. Now we have a question from Kathleen, and that is, can you address the best tires for winter conditions? That's all season versus the snow tires versus studded snow tires.
We don't get into suggesting specific tires. I think it probably goes back more with what you're comfortable driving. Again, I was law enforcement, so I got into the habit of driving all-terrain type tires, all-season type tires, I should say, not all-terrain. But it just depends. I mean, because in all honesty, studded tires, those studs, and they are limited to the time of year you can go ahead and use them. But those studs actually on a roadway can make you skid a little bit. They lift the tire up off the ground. They do dig into the snow, but the studs. So there's pluses and minuses to all of them. It just kind of depends more of what you're comfortable driving.
Okay, another question is from Stan. He admits to being a California transplant and has never driven on icy roads. And his concern has to do with how much to turn the steering wheel when you're in a skid, particularly on black ice. And he is from California, meaning he sees what they do in the movies. And that looks a little bit dramatic with a 90-degree spin of the wheel.
Yeah, it is. Again, the more you turn a wheel, the greater the chance you're going to lose control of that vehicle when you're on ice. What you want to do is you want to try and keep your wheels turned to where you want to go. Gravity is going to kick in, and you are going to slow down eventually. You may not have a lot of traction, but eventually you're going to slow down. At the point where you do get contraction, you don't want to be jerking that wheel, because if you jerk the wheel, you're much more likely to lose control at that point. So you want to have your wheels kind of turned where you want the vehicle to go and kind of leave them there. So at the point you do regain traction, you're going in that direction. And hopefully it's not towards the side of the road or anything else. But that's another point, is that when people lose traction or lose control of the vehicles, mentally, that's quite abrupt, and it kind of throws them. Pulling over the side of the road in order to take a moment to go ahead and calm down a little bit, not a bad thing, not a bad thing at all.
I might add, Tim, you want to be off the brakes as well.
Oh, yeah, yeah. When you're skidding, your brakes aren't doing anything for you.
Okay,
Any more questions?
That's all I got
Okay,
right now.
Kathleen, your speakers or your mic's not on?
I do that all the darn time. Yeah.
Oh, so do
Anyway.
I. So do I.
Well, this kind of goes with the question. You hear a lot about distracted driving. How can people avoid driving distracted?
Distracted driving is a major problem. To address telephones, which is just one aspect of driving, most states have enacted some very stringent laws about talking on a cell phone while you're driving. And the fines are quite big. I don't do it. Driving demands your full-time attention. That should be your job while you're behind the wheel and the vehicle's moving. Besides phones, and I will say in conversations with both of my kids who are young adults right now, my daughter's good to go. My son, I'm still working on him. He seems to think, oh, I can go ahead and split my attention. And the reality is, yes, you can split your attention to a certain point, but unfortunately, if something happens while you're driving, and if you are not giving it your full-time attention, you're probably going to lose control of the vehicle. So leave the phones down. If you get a phone call you got to take, pull over the side of the road, take the phone call at that point. Absolutely don't try and text and drive. I've seen that happen several times everywhere I go. Not just here in New Hampshire, but in Kansas and then traveling across the United States. Other distractions, conversations with people in the car, especially if it's a heated conversation, probably waiting until that you go ahead and get to a place where you can go ahead and, divert your attention to that conversation is probably better. Louder music, conversations between passengers. There's all kinds of things that can take your attention off the roadway, and we truly need to go ahead and keep our attention on the roadway. When you are behind the wheel of a motor vehicle, though most of us have been driving long enough that we feel that it's kind of commonplace to go ahead and drive, but you're in charge of an instrument that can take somebody's life in a matter of seconds. Most crashes are done and over with in 3 to 5 seconds. So you have to give it your full-time attention. Distracted driving is just what we want to try and avoid. Unfortunately, the biggest cause, again, those phones, and I've got an app on my phone that it's hooked into my GPS. When it realizes that my phone is moving at highway speeds or even city speeds, it basically shuts down. It shuffles all the incoming calls over to my voicemail at that point. So that's just one thing that I've done. I've worked, unfortunately, I worked a fatality crash when I was a trooper in Kansas. And, again, Dad took his attention off the roadway to talk on his phone, ended up killing himself and his wife, and the little baby in the car seat in the back was the only one who survived the crash. So you don't ever want to take your attention off the road. If you have to take your attention off the road, go ahead and pull over and kind of go from there.
Which is what I was going to ask you about the new technology. There's a lot of the cars that have new technology that has the phone inside the car, which you can talk to the car instead of actually on the phone.
Yeah, Bluetooth.
I wonder about that. Yeah, Bluetooth.
Yeah, it's the same thing. They've made something to facilitate being able to hold a conversation, but the underlying cause goes back to you're splitting your attention at that point. You're taking attention off of that full-time driving. I'm going to brag on AARP's curriculum. So there's a lot of background that came in, scientific thought and such like. Actually, one of the bigger contributors to this curriculum is MIT's Age Lab over here in Boston. So not too far away. Dr. Coughlin that runs that is a major contributor to the curriculum. And he can, if you want to argue being able to talk and drive at the same time, he's a good person to talk to, because he really, really goes ahead and delves into it and just sets it out there and just says, you know, our brains are just not set up to go ahead and splitting our attention. We can do it a little bit, but again, driving is so much, there's so much involved in driving. I mean, when you think about it, the beginning driver takes them 5 years to gain the experience of the average driver on the road. That's a long time. And training your brain to handle that, you know, again, we have to keep our brain involved in that driving with us. So I don't want to expand too much, but.
Okay, thank you, Tim. How people can take the AARP driver safety course.
Well,
How can they?
There's several ways. You can actually take it online through AARP. And then for checking for classes, that's also the way. Classes have to be registered. The instructor has to register the class at least a month ahead of time. They actually like more than that. People can sign up to take that class either online or with whatever venue that the instructor is teaching at, and kind of go from there. So paying attention to what's going on around the area, contacting like the senior centers or Department of Aging. Those are places where most of that information is fairly. Also, I believe, and Ashley can probably address this, you could probably call our state office here also and maybe find out through our state coordinator, Nancy Hacking, who's the state coordinator for DriveSmart, that where and when classes are going to be. She tends to track those classes as they come. And I see Ashley is jumping on with her mic there. So
I was just going to agree completely. Anyone at the state office could connect you with Nancy if you had questions.
Yep. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much, Tim. Let's see if Bill has any other questions. Bill?
There are no other questions right now. So you've evidently, Tim, answered a lot of the questions with your great information, and certainly your background led some credibility to what you say.
Thank you. Again, I appreciate the invitation to come speak with y'all.
So thank you again, Tim, for joining us. And it's been a pleasure to have you join us this morning. And I have always, as always, learned a lot. And I thank our audience for joining us today for Coffee and Conversation. I hope you enjoy hearing from Tim, and the information that he shares will be of value to you. I will encourage all of you to visit the New Hampshire AARP website. You do not have to be a member of AARP to access it. We will put a link in the chat, which is www.aarp.org/, and then you could put in New Hampshire after the slash if you want to access the New Hampshire website for more virtual programs coming soon, which include paint and sip events, gentle yoga, and yes, more coffees and conversations. If you are interested in becoming a New Hampshire AARP volunteer, please email us at newhampshireaarp@aarp.org. Be well, stay safe out there, stay warm, and take care. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.